Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
I help people commit suicide, but they have to convince me to do it first. Long horror stories from Reddit. No sleep. Episode 7. Laura. The word echoed in the air, somehow both distant and agonizingly near at the same time. I was stunned into silence. Words accelerated through my mind, but the anatomical structures and physiological processes involved in speech production were severed completely. I refused to look at the source of the voice. Do you want out? Do you want to quit? The voice pierced and twisted as if jostling for position with the one I knew to be my former lover's, my sweet Birdie. The latter was equally as familiar, but the slurs and the vitriol made it too ugly to want to face head-on. My bitter, alcoholic self, seething with rage as every syllable slithered down my ear canal and infected my mind, urging me to strike myself for a momentary respite. I clutched at my shirt and tried to breathe, focusing on the things around me and counting them, an old technique I'd recalled from years ago when a far weaker me needed calming. My eyes fell upon my wooden desk, sturdy despite its age, the place where so many of these cases were written up, including this one. A sense of pleasant familiarity began to ebb its way into my body. You can quit anytime you want to, Laura. You just need to be willing to take the plunge, the voice cackled, lights intermittently flickering on and off, visages of something scuttling around as I continued to seek out familiar objects, some semblance of normalcy. I saw the couch where so many had laid their bodies for the final time, my face the last image they saw, the doctor's view of me obscured by his tinted glasses. You just need to be willing to do your job. So many came here with expectations and a desire to seek peace. Why should I be any different? No, why should we be any different? The voice threatened to make my skull split open with the accusation. I only perceived the tears running down my face when the drops cooled my reddened complexion. I pressed on, knowing that if I were going to do this, I would do it properly. Emotions had to be separate from the job. Finally, my eyes fell upon a photo frame that had fallen from the desk and landed face down. I reached for it amid the sea of misery, chaos, and pain, searching desperately for a breath of fresh air. I found it as soon as I overturned the frame. My eyes stopped watering and my breathing steadied. A younger me, mid-laugh with eyes scrunched tight in total joy, held in the heavily tattooed arms of a woman 4 years my senior, wrapping themselves around my waist in an embrace that can never be truly replicated. I still remember how she smelled, the sound of her laughter, the sense of being entirely someone else's as well as your own, enraptured in one moment. It was Birdie and I on our second anniversary. Her long black locks tied back in a neat bun, a couple of strands falling loose from her head and playfully dangling as she stared down at me, making me feel seen in a way that no other person ever had. I smiled and stifled a sob. Professionalism came first. Returning to my feet, I inhaled deeply and found my way back to composure, placing the photo back where it belonged in the process. All right, if this is how it has to be, let's do it properly. I said, shoulders heavy but upright. I'm ready for you, now. I won't ask you if you have the money, I began, moving across the living room with eyes fixed on the empty chair, my chair. I waited a moment, expecting the bitter voice to screech or for the lights to continue to flicker. But, to my surprise, neither happened. Instead, a soft breeze passed me as a gentle silence fell over the room. In an instant, Birdie had switched spots, from the couch to my chair. The reality of the situation became clear as I awkwardly eased myself onto the sofa. Raven locks tied back, pale white complexion, a cute snaggle-tooth grin adorned in piercings that endeared itself to me from the moment she rested her almond eyes upon mine and laughed at my awkward, misworded jumble of a joke. There she was. Not bloodied and lifeless on our bed but permeable, alive, here. But it couldn't be her. It just couldn't. I knew it because I had all of those piercings in a small manila envelope, tucked away in my drawer. A somber-looking police officer handed it to me after she was cremated. In the days following her death, I refused to move even from one room to another without the envelope in hand, as if my own life force were fixed to the assortment of metal pieces that once embellished her face. Consumed by grief and incapable of letting go, I mentally transferred the essence of what made her into material objects, things I could still see, hold, talk to. I understand the irrationality of my actions, but grief eschews logic entirely. It's like an acute, temporary insanity. On particularly cruel days, I still cradle each cold metal piercing in the palm of one hand, counting each one while I struggle to recall the feel of her arms around my waist, the scent of her perfume. It's the closest I've gotten to prayer in my life. My eyes widened and every part of me wanted to cry, but I was not that woman anymore and it was important I showed that. Instead, I smiled softly. "It's been a while, hasn't it, Bertie?" I asked, pushing every emotion I had down into the pit of my stomach. Anything less would be a disaster. She smiled back, my heart melting ever so slightly. "Still doubting it's me, Elle?" She pulled my favorite nickname out, a dirty trick, but it made me chuckle and broke some of the tension. A sudden comfort swept over me, warm like a blanket fresh out of the dryer draped around my shoulders. "Honestly? It can't be you," I began, oddly unable to grapple with the uncanny situation despite everything I'd heard from clients, even experienced myself. There have been many, many people that pass through this room, but someone I know is dead. Someone I buried? I shook my head, the possibility of her presence beyond me still. I'm either losing it, or something is seriously fucked up. Bertie leaned forward, never adjusting her gaze from my own. "You're not wrong, you're definitely losing it," she joked, flashing me the grin again before adjusting her position. "But I've got another reason for being here, you know why, you just haven't figured it out yet." I cocked my head to the side, falling back into work habits and replaying those bitter declarations from earlier in my head, the cogs in my mind beginning to turn as the picture became clearer. "All right, I'll bite. Tell me your story, Bertie. All of it, even the bits I don't want to know." She leaned back and let her head drape over the back of the chair for a moment, exhaling sharply before beginning her tale, the one that haunts me above all the appalling narratives I've heard and documented. For the longest time, I was able to keep those dark clouds at bay. They'd followed me all my life, from the moment I was capable of looking up at the sky and knowing that black is not the color everyone around me was seeing. I don't mean that just figuratively, either. I mean I literally could only ever see black clouds, kind of goth, huh? She forced a smile as I maintained my stare. She coughed before adding, "See, I don't know how this kind of perpetual, stagnant misery affects other people. I can only tell you how it affected me. It was like a numbing agent being applied to me in cycles, starting from childhood. Sometimes, it'd just be a few hours, my favorite book would fail to capture my interest, and I'd take any slight change in tone as impending abandonment, the clouds overhead pouring with rain or ejecting horrific sounds when it got bad. But it'd pass and I would move on. So, you had your bad days, and they were punctuated with good, seems pretty standard so far, but I can relate to that," I replied, affirming as much as I'd done in her life as I continued to do in her passing, that I understood her struggles as best I could. "Right, I know, but eventually the numbness wouldn't subside. By the time I was 20, I had so few days where the sky wasn't screaming out with the voices of things I still don't understand, where the only emotion I would come to know was abject disconnection. I spent those next few years avoiding the world outside my home for fear of hearing the clouds calling to me. Rainy days were the most dangerous for that," she shuddered as she finished, looking out the window for a moment before continuing. "I remember the day I met you. I'd gone to the bar to dampen my sorrows, even though the clouds were almost obsidian and the sounds were overwhelming, I didn't care. I knew I had to go there that day. Your nose was pressed in a book, reading on a bar stool of all places," she laughed, the memory bittersweet now to both of us. Some guy was bothering you, you were anxiously trying to get him to leave you alone but rapidly getting overstimulated and it was going badly. I stepped in and asked you slowly, calmly how I could help Anne. And I only saw you, for the first time in my life I was focused entirely on one thing, I finished, grinning as she reciprocated and nodded. For a time, the clouds weren't as difficult to ignore, but storms can only be held back for so long, I held mine off for a long, long time. It came for me the night of our last argument and I knew that was it. I was given a choice, lose her or lose yourself. I felt a lump in my throat following this statement, an impossible choice for anyone. But didn't you lose both in the long run? She shook her head, a sad smile written across her face. That night, as I took the gun in quivering hands, I heard a scuttling sound from outside our bedroom. Sounds of something clawing at the door, then a low droning sound, calling to me. They were ready for me, and this was the payoff, protecting you in the process. Tears began to streak her face. I want you to know. I need you to know, Elle, it wasn't your fault. It was quick and I didn't suffer, but I just wanted you to be safe. I didn't know how we would end up in the same room again one day, but I never wanted it to be like this. With all of them around us, with the clouds overhead, she shook in her seat, grief overtaking her as I barely held back my own. I'm so sorry for the pain I put you through, Elle. I loved you, you were the sunlight that ripped through my dark clouds and let flowers grow on dead earth. You were my lighthouse when every day threatened to drown me. I just wish you could have seen sooner. Seen what? What do you mean? I pressed her. Our usual dynamic had shifted, between the two of us, I was never the one to suppress my emotions. But I wasn't about to let the walls come down until this was resolved. As I looked at her, I noticed that her faraway gaze was no longer fixated on me, but on the massive windows behind me. Tears openly flowed down her face as she silently sobbed. It's raining out, Elle, it's been raining for a long, long time. You just didn't realize it. I stood up and walked to the window, the clouds above an impossible landscape of the deepest black, bright streaks of crimson occasionally flashing from far above and revealing shapes littering the skylight with the most disturbing shapes imaginable, though I could not fully comprehend them. What is this? I croaked, unable to take my eyes off of what I was seeing. I caught a glimpse of two figures reflected in the window as a flash of lightning illuminated the sky. The zip-tied woman stood behind Bertie's chair, her mask-like face shattered to reveal the only feature on her underlying face, a pair of hollow eye sockets. Who is she? A look of concern crept across Bertie's face. Each time I've tried to appear to you, she's always stood firmly in my way. Just staring with that inhuman, unmoving smirk, shaking her head in opposition. You know I'd go to war for you, and I did try. But she only grew more powerful as time passed, the longer you denied her. I had to come see you, tonight, and I knew that meant you would have to face her, she explained. I could barely watch as she assaulted you with those scathing words, tortured you by mimicking the crab walker, but you did so good. She threw everything she had at you, but you beat her. I knew you would. Confusion still muddled my mind. The throbbing sore spot on my head certainly wasn't helping. Love, you made her. She was the physical manifestation of your grief and guilt, the feelings you never dealt with. I turned to face her once more. I'm so sorry, I lamented. I wanted to be there but I just couldn't. I was overwhelmed. I needed space. I should've. She cut me off gently. What have I always told you? Never apologize for who you are, I answered with an unexpected laugh, a flutter of pleasant nostalgia. That's right, Elle, she replied with her distinctive half-smile, half-hearted in the heartbreaking context. I'm afraid to say I'm here for a reason much bigger than sharing my story with you. Her voice splintered as she revealed, I'm here to guide you as you leave this life behind. I'm going to die. I stammered, equally shocked and dismayed. I just fought my greatest battle, and prevailed. How could this be happening? Yes, she confirmed, gritting her teeth to ward off the next wave of tears that I knew was coming. Bertie feigned strength in trying situations to the point that she'd push me away when she needed me most. I knew it from the moment you injected the woman who could smell death. She leaned into you, inhaled deeply, and this euphoric smile spread across her face. As she was nearing death, I became visible to her. She locked her eyes on mine and nodded ever so slightly in response to my unspoken question. Sorrow overcame her as she began to cry once more. Everything fell apart for me at that moment. I wept for you because there was so much more life left in you. There should have been so much more for you, you should have gone on to do so many things. It shouldn't have to end like this. A flurry of questions, unfulfilled wishes, and contentions rushed through my mind. I couldn't accept this. Was I lying motionless on the floor, rendered unconscious by my fall? Was this another trick of the mind? All of these thoughts, erratic and thrumming, distilled down to one word, one question. Why? You're a smart girl, Elle. I know you've noticed a trend in your cases lately. You're saying yes more often than you say no, Bertie explained. You're messing with some pretty dangerous stuff here. The crab walker came first, but it's not the only one here. I shook my head vigorously until vertigo set in, uprooting me into a fleeting sense of weightlessness. What the hell are they? I asked, directing my gaze out the window as I pressed my hands flat against the glass for stability. A swarm of inhuman shadows shifted outside. I found myself grateful that their details remained obscured. Bertie shrugged lightly, frowning. I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what I do know. They feed on grief, guilt, pain, and most of all, death. The more they consume, the more influence they have on the reality you live in, the reality I used to live in as well, blissful in my ignorance. The living has a severely limited capacity for perception. What do you mean, influence? They magnify the wickedness already present in human nature, distorting and perverting normal insecurities, obsessions, and resentments, altering their trajectory entirely, ultimately propelling them to horrific conclusions. They feed, and the cycle continues, she answered before adding with a shudder, they're absolutely insatiable. I know you've seen this pattern in your clients, and it's starting to happen to you. I flinched, racking my brain for any information to support this claim. Detecting the shift in my demeanor, Bertie softened her tone. You caught a glimpse of the crab walker in the kitchen the other night. It would have been content to have you to itself. You keep it well fed, she declared with an indignant laugh. Unfortunately, others have arrived. You fought with your girlfriend last week, shoved her backwards onto the floor. I know you're not proud of it, but it wasn't you. I was overcome with a sudden rage, I mused flatly, my eyes tracking the unsettling movement of the blackened clouds, swelling and spiraling. Like nothing I've ever felt before. I try not to think of it, but I felt that pressure on my shoulders, firm and steady. Then there was the slow pooling of warm liquid dripping down the back of my neck. I hurt her, and I'm so ashamed to admit it, but the truth is, I wanted to do much more than that. Stating this aloud alarmed me. What can I do? How can I stop this? Bertie visibly deflated, despondent. I don't think there's anything you can do, love. She hesitated, apparently weighing a difficult decision. I need to show you something. It's going to scare you, but it will help you understand. I blinked once and reality shifted, fell apart, and constructed anew. The floor beneath me, the window before me, all the things I understood to be real appeared hazy and indistinct. I jolted around to face Bertie, dizzy and desperate to find my footing again. I was fascinated to find that she was now rendered in vivid color. The variety of hues tattooed across her body were nearly palpable. The inked pomegranate on her shoulder looked almost edible. The biomechanical tattoo on her opposite arm grew fully animated, machinery whirring, gears turning. Wonder turned to dread as a flicker of motion in the corner of the room distracted my gaze where an impossibly tall figure loomed. Its shoulders hunched to accommodate the ceiling, now barely visible to me. My eyes lethargically trailed up its body. An eternity seemed to pass before I finally located its face, two beady eyes and a monstrous smile with fingernails where teeth should have been. Other creatures filtered into my line of sight, slowly at first, then rapidly, unstoppable. A torso, its back studded in twitching eyeballs, dragged itself along the floor with one rotting arm. A long, wriggling stretch of mucus-covered flesh slithered past me. Another crawled on 6 arms before standing upright on 2 legs, its monstrous, oozing pit of a mouth the only structure on its face. Another was made up of 2 torsos attached at the chest, its 2 heads facing each other. One face released a long, dripping tongue to lap at its other entirely blank face. Another's face was composed only of 4 large eyes, blinking compulsively. It advanced toward me, sluggishly placing one foot in front of the other, its joints cracking with each deliberate movement. It took a few steps before I realized it was walking backward, with its head fastened on the wrong way. Another figure scuttled past me, its movement so hasty that its form was indiscernible upon first sight. As it settled, I was able to identify it by its composition, a torso with 2 pairs of arms on either side. The crab walker. It reared up on its back arms to display a cavernous, leaking laceration on its underside. The ear-splitting hiss emitted from the cavity led me to assume it was its mouth. The sound of my name came as a comfort this time. I turned back to face Birdie as she pointed far off into the distance. The fleeting comfort was snuffed out as I followed the path of her gesture towards the window. The outer structures of my home had entirely vanished, allowing me to view the incredibly desolate area that lay beyond my normal awareness. The storm continued to rage, with frequent flashes of lightning illuminating the scene. A stone wall was erected within the barren landscape. I seized in terror, frozen in place, as I observed what the barricade had undoubtedly been constructed to contain, an endless mass of limbs, tendrils, and tangled body parts. A mess of creatures, so numerous and so vast, yet compacted so closely together that it was impossible to discriminate one from the next. The contents of the sea of horror frantically stretched in desperation towards the wall. An adult hand with what appeared to be infant's fingers clung to the crest of the partition, its minuscule knuckles blanched white as it strained to hurtle itself over the barrier. I didn't want to see what followed. My concept of reality reassembled as quickly as it had fallen apart. I collapsed to the floor, shocked and horrified. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Birdie apologized. "I needed you to understand the gravity of your situation. From the eyes your doctor saw in his patient, to the creatures the left side man saw, all the things you've heard, really, these beasts are coming. And you are helping them to cross over. They've caught on to you. Each client's misery and ultimate death brings them closer. They're tracking the stench of death, and it's wafting off of you, attracting them like a lure." I sobbed on the floor, speechless. "They've already got their hooks in you," she sighed, voice cracking under the weight of her words. "If you stay, I can assure you that you will destroy everything you love. You will destroy her." She raised a digit to point at a second picture on the wall depicting myself with my current girlfriend, equal parts drunk on alcohol and drunk on love. Love that I'd never in my wildest dreams believed I would ever find again. Bolting upright, my instinctual resolve to live forced me to rebel against this assertion, one final fight. I'm not ready to die. I don't want to die. I will not make this judgment." Birdie abandoned her seat on the couch, gliding over to the stereo on the other side of the room to press play. "You already have, love," she countered, gesturing to the readied needle in my hand. Stunned by this revelation, my eyes widened. I couldn't recall preparing the injection at all. "It appears I have," I confirmed, surrendering. Emotions had to be set aside, as always. By the time you finish reading this, I will probably be gone. It seems that my unwillingness to confront my darkest truths failed to protect me, instead ushering me to this unfortunate end. Sharing my journey with you all has been the opportunity of a lifetime, but mine has ended. Yours hasn't. I'll leave you with this: if you find someone worth holding on to, never, ever let them go. That is, until the inevitability of death comes. It's okay to love and let go in the same breath. Be stronger than me. If there is another life after this, you have my word that I will certainly try. Come on. Let's get out of here, Birdie invites with that snaggle-tooth smile, beckoning to me with one hand. This is my final judgment.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe, The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.